Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, Metro Councilman at Large Jerry Maynard and syndicated talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome again, gentlemen. Nice to see you. A lot of interesting election results locally and nationally with the midterm primaries going on. Locally, the 21st Senate District finally got a winner in the Democratic race. Longtime Senator Douglas Henry wins by 17 votes. But that's not the end of Jeff Yarbro, is it?
No.
No, he's got a big-time future, and this I think, is the election that will not end. Between that one and the 6th District race, this is the election season that won't end, but now it looks like it finally has, and we can focus on November. But I think Jeff Yarbro does have a big career. He's bright, he's charismatic, he's got a big future ahead of him, and he's handled the race and the loss of the race perfectly to suit himself to kind of move in.
And in fact, he handled the campaign right, and he always honored Senator Henry, and I think he set himself in a position for the future of the Democratic Party. We don't know how many more terms Senator Henry will run, but Jeff Yarbro has put himself in a proper position to be able to take over that seat when Senator Henry decides not to run again. The other great thing about Yarbro, he was able to show he can raise money, and that's the key. When you are a freshman, when you're a rookie, and you're the first time you're running for office, the toughest thing is having those relationships with donors. This guy showed that even though this was his first race, he raised over $250,000. That's incredible.
And he had to have the ability to ask for it, too, because, I mean, that's one of the big challenges, I think, for a first-time candidate. It's not comfortable to ask people for money. If you can get past that hurdle, you're much better than most other candidates right out of the blocks, and clearly he has that ability, or he wouldn't have been able to raise
And there is a Republican challenger to Senator Henry. We shouldn't give him the election
yet.
There is, but that may be tougher than Jeff Yarbro taking on Senator Henry.
Although this week you had Beth Harwell basically coming out in support of Senator Henry, which, again, this is Beth Harwell who's talking about making a run to be the House leader or the House Speaker if the Republicans take a majority. I'm not sure how that helps her emerge as the Republican choice when she's backing a Democrat in a contested battle.
Former head of the state GOP, too.
That's right. And then she has a candidate against her, too. We have a Democratic candidate running against her in the general. So she shouldn't take for granted. I mean, she still has a battle on her hand. I know that she has a lot more money than he has, but he's working very, very hard, making all the phone calls, and he's trying to raise money because he's hit me up for some dough, so I know he's out there raising money. Exactly right.
These are the interesting nuances of these little races. Over in the 6th District, the GOP over the primary over there was obviously very rough, as we know. They had a unity tour this week. Senator Diane Black is the winner there. She's the nominee. But how can you have a unity tour when her main challenger, Lou Ann Zelneck, doesn't show up because she's being sued by Diane Black?
Yeah, I think just in future tips for candidates down the road, if you want to have a unity tour, dismiss your lawsuit against your opponent before you expect him to show up at your party. There is some bitterness that's left over from that race, and that lawsuit is going to continue towards depositions. Whenever you're in a case, and Jerry's a lawyer, will acknowledge this, in a slander or libel case, you got to be careful because truth is a defense.
That's right.
And when you get into the discovery process and they start taking depositions and looking into your records, there might be stuff you don't even know about that they end up finding. This was a bad decision to file the lawsuit in the first place, and it was certainly a bad decision on Diane Black's part not to dismiss it immediately after the first hearing went away.
And if the court doesn't seal the records, everything is a public record. The worst thing is what if it is sealed? Then your opponents can use that. What's sealed? Why is it sealed? What's going on here? The other thing we have to deal with on the Democratic side, you got Mr. Carter, who's running against Diane, and I think that he has a great shot. I know that the win is against the Democrats in that district. I know that he is the underdog. But if the Republicans are not unified, we need to find out how much infighting they're going to do. And if it becomes a really nasty infight during the general during the general election, I think Carter right now, with a slight chance, it improves dramatically if they're still infighting. And Steve can speak to that more than I can.
Now, does he actually live in the district yet? Will he be able to vote for himself?
Bob's supposed to ask the questions. Steve, Bob's supposed to ask the questions.
He told me when I asked him that he plans to move to the district, but I don't think he lives in it yet. But I think he actually has moved back.
I think you saw this with George Flynn in that 8th district race, who didn't live in the district in the Republican primary there. It is awfully hard to make the pitch that people ought to vote for you when you can't vote for yourself.
And the GOP has targeted this particular district, I think, as the #1 district in the country that they want to take over, and they probably will.
Look, you've got the Democrats having to defend races like Russ Feingold in Wisconsin, Barbara Boxer in California. When you look at the 50 to 75 key races around the country that are competitive, I don't think the Democrats are going to put a lot of money into this particular one. When they've got to defend races, they have a better chance at winning. So I think whoever wins the Republican nomination was going to win this this one, and that'll be Diane Black.
Jerry's right. If the ugliness continues,
I'm telling
never know.
Let me tell you this. Let's talk about Zach Wamp in Haslam. You talk about Zelneck, and you talk about Diane Black. If you're still fighting the primary, if you're still engaged in a nasty fight with the primary, it's very, very difficult if you have not united your base. And Steve and I both ran for office. You get your base not only unified, you get your base excited. And if your base is disjointed, that's going to tear it up. And I'm not saying that Diane Black's going to look. I'm just saying that Carter has a chance if Diane Black cannot unify her base, and if the Republicans stay at home. They're not going to vote for Carter probably, but if they stay home and they tell their friends to stay home, that's where Mr. Carter has a chance to win this race.
Well, and if you have the appearance that Haslam's going to win big, you may not have what's motivating the base to turn out like we saw earlier. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think you're going to see Republican enthusiasm because of State House, State Senate, the governor's race, a lot of other enthusiasm that's going to be playing. But the other factor that Jerry's pointing out is right. The professionals in this business, the candidates, it's easier, and we saw some body language that may show it's hard even for them to hug and kiss and make up. But the professionals, the ones that are the candidates that are used to competition, it's like playing sports. You know, you shake the other guy's hand, you move on. It is harder for the people that get emotionally invested behind their candidates to make that transition because they are so wedded to the person they've backed and put out yard signs in the rain, marched in parades in the heat. It's harder for them to turn the tide in a short period between a primary and election. I think that's where the real issue is.
And let me make this point about Zach Wamp. If you look at his Facebook, he has 14,000 friends who are still upset about the fact that he lost. And if you ever go on his Facebook, those messages are not about unity. Those messages are not about let's get together behind Haslam. And the question becomes whether McWhorter can tap into that or not. That's the answer. I don't know the answer to that, whether McWhorter can tap into that or not. But you still have these people, like Steve said, who are still unhappy and still angry that their candidate lost in the way. And the only person who can really bring them back to Haslam is Wamp. I don't know if Wamp's going to do that. I don't know if Zelneck's going to do that.
You know, as I'd point out that in politics, as Jerry understands, even those friends on Facebook are mostly acquaintances.
45 seconds. 45 seconds. Are we surprised it's not Labor Day yet that we haven't seen a whole lot yet from Bill Haslam or Mike McWhorter as far as the general election is concerned? Other than Bill Haslam's campaign commercial that has Lamar Alexander and Phil
People
Bredesen.
wanted a breather. In Florida, they probably need a longer breather. But I think people wanted a breather. After Labor Day, it's on.
Well, I think that McWhorter cannot afford that. McWhorter has to go hit hard right now. They got a debate coming up pretty soon. McWhorter has to say right now, I have a plan for Tennessee. And Haslam is running good commercials about good guys, good governors, and I'm going to be a good governor with no specifics. McWhorter has got to come up with his plan of action of how he's going to create jobs, balance the budget, improve education, deal with health care, and all the other issues facing us. McWhorter needs to be working hard because he's behind. I believe that he is going to get started. He's going to come out swinging. He has to.
Jerry Maynard, Steve Gill, appreciate your insight. Stay with us as we continues in a moment.